Buckle up, because Disney's apparently going to give us a ton of different sequels and franchises, and maybe, like you, I'm not necessarily happy about it, but I do want to give some context to why it's happening, and I think it's actually a good thing. So recently on an investment call, Bob Iger came out and he basically started telling everybody about this new slate of films that's going to come out. Specifically, everyone got excited and the news got shared around that Moana 2 is coming out. What was going to be happening with Moana 2 was it was going to be a Disney Plus series, and now it's becoming a film. But in the next few years, as far as all of the sequels and franchise films and live-action remakes, we're going to be getting the live-action Snow White, the Mufasa film, which is a sequel to the live-action Lion King. We're going to get Inside Out 2. We're going to get Moana 2. And of course, there's going to be Frozen 3 and 4, and we're going to have The Mandalorian as a film instead of a show. And then, of course, we're going to have the MCU continue, which has been going on for years and years now, to the point where starting at the beginning is almost an impossible task. If all of that is a bit frustrating, especially for those of us who love original films, original ideas, I understand you, I'm with you. But on the other hand, I want to talk a little bit about the history of sequels and remakes and franchises and things that are well known to kind of give context to why this is happening. And I think it's happening because the entire film industry is going through a really difficult time. In fact, the world in general is going through a really difficult time. Economics are awful currently, despite what Wall Street keeps telling us, because people aren't spending time and money anywhere, doing anything leisurely. People are really trying to budget and save money. There seems to be a new war announced every day. People are reluctant to go out because people are still afraid of the world in a post-2020 scene when COVID kept us all indoors. So to give a little bit of context to this, I want to go back to the Great Depression and the World War II era of filmmaking. Some people would call it the golden age of Hollywood, and I agree. I love those films, I love that time period. But what people don't think about often enough is that those films were all made pretty rapidly, with pretty much the same exact stars, playing similar types of roles. And all of the major studios had the types of films that they made specifically that they were kind of known for. Universal was known for the monster movies. Paramount was known for their westerns. MGM was known for their musicals. Warner Brothers was known for making gangster films. There was a point in time where an act like Abbott and Costello, possibly one of the most famous comedy duos of that time period, were making 2 or 3 films a year, and they were following kind of just the same old formula. Essentially, it was, come see Abbott and Costello, do this thing. People were showing up because they wanted to see Abbott and Costello. It didn't matter where Abbott and Costello were or what they were doing, they just wanted to see them. Similar in a way to say, hey, this is a new Star Wars film, or hey, this is a new Marvel film. Where we used to put an emphasis on the actors or comedy acts or whatever, or even the genre at that time period, we now put the focus on franchises or directors. I'm not saying that it was a bad film, it was probably one of my favorite films of 2023, but people went to go see Oppenheimer because it was a Christopher Nolan film, not because it was Oppenheimer, right? People go to see Marvel movies, even reluctantly going to see Marvel movies, because it's a Marvel movie. For years now, people have wanted me to talk about the problem that Disney has with all of its live-action remakes. And do I agree that the live-action remakes aren't for everyone or aren't as creatively fulfilling as they could be? Absolutely. I'm not somebody who's clamoring for Mufasa coming out. However, I do recognize that the reason why these movies have continued to do so well in the box office and why the movies that are being made in all of Hollywood are franchises and sequels and remakes is comfort and familiarity. The reason why the golden age of Hollywood was so successful during the Great Depression and during World War II, at a time where people did not economically have the finances to go out to the films or to do most anything, was because they could rely on the same actors or same genres to give them a sense of comfort and reliability. And at a time where money was scarce, they knew that if anything could entertain them, it would be Cary Grant, or it would be Humphrey Bogart, or it would be a slew of different actors. If you're a fan of gangster films, You went to go see the latest gangster film, and it was just because you needed something to see. You needed something to draw your attention away. And that's kind of where we are now. People want that sense of comfort and control in a time where they don't feel like they have a lot of comforts or control in their lives. On top of this, I want to talk a little about streaming. I'm going to go further in depth on these kinds of things when we talk about streaming as a whole in one of the next big narrative videos that's coming out. I know I'm kind of breaking a fourth wall here, but Joe and I are working on the next big narrative video. If you didn't see the Mighty Ducks video that we did, the next one is going to be about how streaming has ruined Hollywood. And one of the things about the streaming industry that has ruined Hollywood is that it's not making a lot of money. There's a cap on how much money can be made from subscriptions. There's only so many people in the world willing to subscribe to a streaming service. And when you put Moana on the streaming service, the film, not the possible upcoming series, and you see that it's constantly doing really, really well. It's in the top 10 most streamed films almost every month, and it has been for years now. It makes sense to move the series that you were going to make to the theaters, because they are now realizing that streaming does not make them as much money as box office numbers and theater goers. And at a time where people are looking for safe bets at the movie theaters, of course, Moana, if you loved the original, Moana 2 is going to deliver the same type of thing. The same with Inside Out 2 or Toy Story 5 or Frozen 3 and 4. And even though people aren't really talking about this similarity, Moana 2 and The Mandalorian and Grogu, the movie from Star Wars that was the show and it's going to go to theaters, is kind of the exact same thing. Another announcement that was made by Bob Iger at this investment call is that they were scaling back on Marvel's films and television output. And it's because they over-exhausted the franchise, and they realized that these franchises are fragile, and if you put too much out, people aren't willing to return. And so instead of putting the emphasis so much on putting out 4 or 5 shows a year or 3 or 4 films a year, they're going to scale it back to having 1 film a year and maybe 2 or 3 shows in a year. But still, what's going to happen is that those films and those shows are going to have crossover. So if you've seen the shows, you might want to watch the films. Or if you've seen the films, you might want to watch the shows. In a sense, it's going to that idea that Michael Eisner loved so much during the 90s, which was synergy. They want people to recognize that they can spend their money not only at the theaters, but you could get a subscription to Disney Plus and be able to follow the story continually. And whether or not you agree with that type of business strategy, it is a business strategy that has worked in the past and will probably still work here. So for all of the people that ask me about why remakes are still being made at Disney, or why it seems that sequels are just the thing that's being made in Hollywood, I have to always point back to the golden age of Hollywood, in the years where genres were consistent, and the years where movie stars were pushing out 2 or 3 films a year. Some people would say that the golden age of Hollywood is the peak of cinema, and to a certain extent, I don't think that those people are wrong. I, in fact, love those films. I just sat back and watched Casablanca the other day because it's such a great movie. But that time period was also about making money and being able to survive in a time where economics were down. And in a time period going into the 50s and 60s when economics were rising and people were doing better, cinema began to change. The ideas around what could be made changed. More originality came out of it because the finances were there. So for all of you who are thinking, God, I wish that these sequels and franchise films would finally end, at some point they will. When the economics go up, when things get better, and hopefully things will get better sooner than later. So, thanks for watching. Keep moving forward.